the chance for a short break in the sun. I've enjoyed it and are fully refreshed. Item 1 is the evacuation procedure, and since everyone in the room is familiar with it, I don't intend to read it out. But as people do on planes, I remind you to read through it to make sure you're acquainted with it. Apologies for absence. We have Neil Phillips. Declarations of interest. Are there any in addition to those that are printed? No. Item 4, the minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy to agree those as a true record?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, is that agreed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Item 5 is public consultation. And I have people wishing to speak on items 6, 8, 9, 12 and 13 and 15. Okay. On item 6, Councillors Evans and Wilson. Item 8, Councillor Wilson. Item 9, Councillor Evans. Item 12, Councillor Evans, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. On item 13, the Town Centre Regeneration, Councillor Wilson. And item 15, Councillor Wilson. There are no others that are indicated. Okay. I'm going to take them in the order of the agenda then, because it's nearly everyone somebody wishes to speak. So item 6 is the local development scheme update. In Neil's absence, Catherine, I wondered if you could possibly take us through this report, please.
I can do. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, under government legislation, we have to produce a local development scheme which sets out the timetable and the types of planning documents that you're going to prepare. When there's a major change or you want to add things into that, you should try and produce it annually. So although the last one was only approved by Cabinet last October, because of the slight delay in the local plan and the beginning of the review of the next local plan, we are now reporting an updated local development scheme, which is in Appendix A to you. That sets out all the work that the policy team will be doing over the next couple of years and some timetable, and sets out the timetable when the public can get involved as well. With the supplementary planning documents, some of those have already been produced, and there'll be a single member meeting towards the end of September in order to start some consultation on those. That's likely to take place in October and November. Development plan documents, which are the two proposed, are for the town centre, the action plan and Gypsies and Travellers. They have to be approved by Cabinet before we can go out to public consultation, and they will also be subject to discussion at the new local plan committee, I think the title has been. Now that the membership of that was approved, we'll be getting together with Phil's section, committee section, to set out some times and dates for those meetings.
Thank you very much. We do have 2 speakers. Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I hope you all had a good summer. I wanted to speak briefly on the supplementary planning documents table, which is on page 30 of the report, and the strategic site concept plans more specifically. With regards to policy HSG4 with the Borough plan to build just under 700 dwellings on the Bedworth woodlands, as part of the key development principles, the policy states that development will be required to come forward in accordance with the concept plan. My concern is that within this report, the plan date for adoption for the concept plans is February 2020. However, what happens if planning applications from Arbury and the Nicholas Chamberlain Trust start to come forward before then? Is it possible to have some assurance that the concept plans for HSG4 will be adopted before those planning applications start to come forward? Page 28 of the report briefly gives a timetable for the adoption of the town centre area action plans. I think these plans will be absolutely vital for both towns going forward. In Nuneaton, we've got the transferring the Nuneaton project, and in Bedworth, the town's crying out for some sort of regeneration. Can the leader give us some sort of update as to whether the Bedworth Town Centre team has met yet and what role they will have in developing this action plan? And also, obviously, the leader has stated that the council will be preparing a bid for the second round of funding for the Future High Streets Fund for Bedworth. The report states that the town centre action plans will not be adopted until November 2020. Would the council potentially be able to look at bringing the Bedworth plan forward slightly in line with the deadline for the second round of the Future High Streets funding to make Bedworth's case look stronger? And on a final note, with regards to the borough plan, which is mentioned in this report, I wanted to repeat my view that we need an immediate review of the borough plan, and the council really needs to come clean and give members a date for when that review will commence. Obviously, with one of the strategic sites already, the Gypsy Lane development, there's been problems with the Section 106 agreements, and there's a potential that we've lost £2.3 million. So an immediate review is vital. So let's get it going. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification for Councillor Evans? No? Thank you very
Thank you.
much, Councillor Evans. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Cabinet. I too welcome this report, mainly because it gives us the opportunity to begin the much needed review of the borough plan, because it has to be incorporated within this document to enable the borough plan to be reviewed. And as a member who sits on planning, I think it's especially vital given the fact that with the Gypsy Lane site, and indeed I had to chair that meeting, which was in some respects quite awkward, because the report of the officers showed that we had actually as a council made a mistake in the drafting of the borough plan, which could and probably will, based on what I've read of the new planning committee paperwork, lead us to losing £2.3 million worth of Section 106 contributions because we drafted it incorrectly. That being plain open space contribution and sports contribution, which I think is a crying shame when there will be 575 houses and that the developer will not be paying what is effectively the community contribution to offset the damage that they will do to the area. And it makes me wonder what other mistakes may be lying within the borough plan that could cost us in the future, and therefore I think the review is even more urgent now. Like Councillor Evans, I also wish to speak about the strategic site concept plans, because that concerns me as a ward member who is about to have 621 houses imposed on us by the borough plan. I have already had meetings with local developers about that to try and mitigate the impacts, but the information that I'm given from Taylor Wimpey is that they'll be having their consultation this month for Golf Drive, which means they will not be that far from having a planning application. And I'm concerned that the planning application and then the determination of that planning application might fall outside of the timescales, particularly for the strategic site concept plan to be adopted by February 2020. Whether they coincide or not, I don't know, but the inspector said that Golf Drive must have that strategic site concept plan. So I would, like Councillor Evans, seek some reassurance, because that is going to be vital in how Golf Drive is pieced together when it is developed. And if we don't get that right, then that will be to the detriment of the residents. So we need to make sure that as a council, we have now imposed these 621 houses on my residents in Golf Drive and on other strategic sites throughout the borough. We now have to follow through in a timely manner what the inspector has said is required to make those sites work for local residents. So I hope Cabinet will very much take that on board and exercise all due diligence and push this through as quickly as humanly and legally possible.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any points of clarification?
Yeah, I want some clarification, just probably off Phil, to be honest.
Can I say this is points of
Yeah.
clarification from Councillor Wilson at this stage?
Well, okay then, but
Is there anything you want to ask Councillor Wilson?
no, I'll leave it then. But
Can I thank you, Councillor Wilson, for your comments? We do now come to where members can actually ask questions. Chris?
yeah, so going on the questions that have just been asked about potentially losing 106 money and what have you, that's not going to affect when it comes back to planning. It's not going to be a predetermined. We can't accused of anything there, can we? Because it's just been mentioned that we potentially lost 106 money on the Gypsy Lane site.
No, Chair, it's not an issue of predetermination. It's not a matter that's before the panel, so...
So, right, okay, that's okay then.
Councillor.
Sorry. Just on that, clarification on eyesight planning as well, obviously. I mean, I've got no problem with mentioning the Gypsy Lane site, because I'm not making a decision on the Gypsy Lane site, I'm making a decision on a policy. With reference to what's happened there, as all the other strategic sites and the wording being checked, Philip, to make sure this can, or whoever, Catherine, sorry, that this cannot happen again.
Yes, it has, and the application was deferred for a legal opinion, which will be reported to committee next week.
Yeah.
Okay. In regard to, there was a question asked, I think specifically of myself, in regard to plans for Bedworth. Bedworth is a very important town in our borough. We do have transformational plans for Nuneaton, and we have said very openly that should Bedworth wish to submit a bid process, we will fund a feasibility study if that centre and its businesses should wish to actually have one. We've been very open about that, and as councillors are also aware, we are compiling a visioning document, not too dissimilar to Nuneaton's transformation plans for Bedworth. So I'm sure in due course all elected members will receive more information in that regard. Catherine, can I ask you, there was a query about the timetable for concept plans and developers submitting applications.
Yeah, the concept plan DB, the SPD, is just being finalised at the moment and will be reported to the Cabinet member at the same time as all the other SPDs. We have to carry out public consultation on supplementary planning documents, and our consultation document says we should do that for 8 weeks. That will then have to be reported back to Cabinet for approval. And I think the Constitution says that it then has to go to full council to be adopted. So the timetable is dependent on the administrative timetable that we already have, and obviously there may have to be some changes to it as a result of the public consultation. So that consultation will begin as soon as possible after the single member decision, and it will be reported back to the first available Cabinet and full council.
And in the
If an application is submitted in the meantime, we will use those concept plans to begin to assess the application. Although some of the developers are carrying out consultation events, as Councillor Wilson says, it's unlikely that they'll be submitting those applications within the next few weeks. We get 13 weeks, which is just over 3 months, to determine a major application. It's unlikely that we would have to report one of those to the Planning Application Committee before that concept plan SPD is actually adopted as a policy of the Council.
Any further comments? Anything else you need to say, Catherine?
No, thank you.
The recommendations are printed then in section 2. This is that the scales identified be noted, and we approve the LDS and obviously publish it on the council's website. Are those recommendations approved?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Catherine, as well, for the work you and your team are doing on that. Very important. We then come on to our next item, which is item 7, the Homelessness Reduction Act, 1 year on. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, the papers are before you, so you've all had a chance to read them and digest them and everything. But I'll just go through some summary points of the report. The content of the report should speak for itself, however, the key points to mention and reiterate are as follows. In order to deliver this major piece of new legislation, additional staffing has been required and made possible in part due to contributions from the government by way of the New Burdens Funding and Flexible Housing Support Grant. The continued levels of government funding are unknown, and therefore the Council's homelessness service remains a general fund spend pressure. Increases have been experienced in terms of numbers of people approaching Bedworth Borough Council for help, and in terms of the complexity of the vulnerabilities, which has in turn meant an increase in temporary accommodation placements. On top of this fact, the new legislation requires longer periods of time during stages of process to be using temporary accommodation, and as in unprecedented spend on B&Bs and hotels. The lack of fluid affordable housing supply through MBBC stock housing associations and the private rented sector. Officers remain committed to delivering excellent services to those that are homeless or facing homelessness, and homelessness prevention tools. For example, the bond assistance scheme are being used wherever they can be to avoid homelessness. Conversion of the council house will enable officers to place households into high quality temporary accommodation similar to that provided following the conversion of Spitalfields and Bedworth. This is by far preferable to the use of B&Bs, where kitchen facilities are lacking and rooms are rarely to a high standard. There are other possibilities potentially available to limit our reliance on B&Bs, and this is detailed in a further report at tonight's cabinet. So that's in brief what this is. But we've got Jane Grant here to answer any questions that I can't.
Okay.
So
we actually don't have any speakers on this, but is there any cabinet members to say anything? I wonder if we've got the figures, Jane. I know you're an expert at knowing how many people are on our housing waiting list and our homelessness, but I note the figures have increased substantially from 17-18 to 18-19, quite a significant increase. Is that being replicated this year thus far?
Yes.
So we are having a further increase
Yes.
in terms of homeless
Yeah.
households.
And nationally, it isn't peculiar to Nuneaton and Bedworth. And that's for lots of complex reasons. Lack of affordable housing generally, nationwide, welfare reform, universal credit, loss of private rented accommodation, or all sort of a bit of a perfect storm really at the moment.
I mean, I just think that having a roof over your head is perhaps the most important thing that everybody needs, is shelter from the weather, whether it be the intense heat we've had recently, or indeed going into winter and very cold weather. And I just find it frankly quite shocking that in 2019 we have such high numbers of homeless households. It's really shocking, and at 4.1 actually it brings it home further to you, the numbers of children that are actually having to be put into temporary accommodation. I commend the work of our housing options team and our officers working in that, but there is always a human cost, isn't there, to those families that unfortunately find themselves in need of using temporary accommodation. It's very saddened with the continuation of austerity. It doesn't seem that the end is in sight quickly, which is very sad. Anything else you want to add, Chris?
no, just the recommendations to the content of the report be noted and further updated brought to Cabinet in 2020.
I think it's really important that we do have a further report. This is a majorly important issue, and the financial implications as well as the human implications, the financial implications for the general fund are significant, and we need to keep a tight look at those as well. So we all have
Councillor Ashton, just ask one question. When's that, you talk about further report coming, Jane, in 2020. Do you know what the time frame is for that? When?
Well, the reason the 12 months on has taken till September this year, because although it was April that there was the 12 months on, it took us a while to get statistics from the data. Yeah, so next year it should speed up a bit, so we should be getting the quarterly statistics very quickly after the end of each quarter. So June, maybe we could come back in June to do 2 years on.
Yeah, I think
Because we should have, rather than waiting till...
Can I suggest that we leave the portfolio holder to liaise with housing officers about the most appropriate time for a report back to us? You know, it may be we need an early report if things, we don't know what tomorrow brings, do we? And I sincerely hope that things improve, but I do think we need to keep a watching brief. Because, you know, we are a caring council, we're very concerned about people being homeless, and we need to keep a look on this. Okay, with that suggestion, Chris, that you look at when is appropriate, are we happy to accept the recommendations? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And moving on to item 8, the annual Treasury Management Report 1819. The Sitford Code on Treasury Management requires that the Council receives regular reports, including an outturn report. This report details the Treasury Management activity for the 1819 financial year for this authority and includes the prudential and Treasury indicators which require presenting to full Council for approval. The tables at sections 5.1 and 5.2 summarise the Council's closing net debt provision and loans held for the General Fund and Housing Revenue Account to the end of March 2019. The Council invests its cash balances in the Treasury markets across a range of institutions to ensure that risk and return are effectively managed. The 36 million of cash that the Council is investing at the end of March 2019 comes from a range of sources. Some ring-fenced for specific purposes, and the table at section 5.3 of this report tries to explain where these cash resources have come from. Many of them are ring-fenced. It is not fair to say that we have millions and millions swirling around in our accounts that can be sent. More detailed information on borrowing and investment performance is reported in section 8 through to section 10. Appendix 1 shows the actual prudential indicators for 1819 compared to the original estimates, and all the indicators are within the expected range with no prudential limits breached. Recommendations are at section 2. We are requested to recommend these to Council for approval as required by SIPVA regulations. I have one speaker in this, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm asked to speak on this item mainly because I know that there are usually some quarters who tend to try and denigrate the work of the finance department and all the work that they do. And I just want to put on record from my side of the chamber and the work that I do with the finance team working with Simone and Craig, I may have extremely strong disagreements where the controlling group decides to allocate the money. That's a political decision. But I know, having worked very closely with members of the finance team, that how that money is spent is done above board, according to the book, and is done with absolute honesty and integrity. And I wanted to speak at Cabinet, as I usually do on this item, knowing that there are those certain quarters who denigrate the work of our hard-working officers in the finance team. I think by and large there is mainly cross-party consensus that our officers do a hard job in interesting times that we live in, and that they deserve some recognition publicly for all the hard work they do. When it comes to shadow budget time, I know I will absolutely get the best advice, honestly, up straight and frank to me when it comes along, and that is the perfect working relationship for both an opposition and, I would imagine, being in control as well. So I have no issues about how the money is spent, but just the usual issues about where some of the money is spent.
I think on this occasion, Councillor Wilson, we're going to have over a 2/3 majority of the Council that will vote in that particular one today. Can I thank you for your comments?
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Anything you want to add, Craig?
No, just thank you for the comments from Ms. Lawson.
I think, as I've said, I think those comments about our appreciation of our finance team are very deeply held by certainly the controlling group and indeed the main opposition group. The other group isn't here today, and the Green member, but certainly held by, as I say, well over 2/3 of councillors in the chamber. So thank you. Are those recommendations agreed?
Agree. Yeah.
Yep. We then come on to the, I've done it item 8, I've got to go back to the front of the agenda now. I'm catching up with myself. Item 9, which is the General Fund in HRA Quarter 1 monitoring report. This report sets out the forecast outturn position for the General Fund, HRA and capital programmes as at the end of June. Section 4 summarises the current General Fund position, which is an adverse variance of £339,000, and this is largely due to increased demand for temporary accommodation. Further details on variances for the year for the General Fund are shown in Appendix A. The HRA is currently showing a small favourable variance compared to the budget of £18,000, and further details are given at Appendix B. Section 5 details the key spend pressures for the year so far, including a reduction in income from recyclable materials due to market changes, as well as the increased demand for temporary accommodation. A summary of key income generation is shown at Table 6, and this shows a mixed picture so far. These will continue to be closely monitored for the rest of the year. A brief update on the capital programme is shown at Section 8. There are no changes requiring approval at this stage, other than the increase to the budget for the council house conversion, which was taken via a special urgency decision in July. A revised programme is attached at Appendix D to reflect the revised programme. The recommendations are shown at Section 2 of the report. I have Councillor Evans wishing to speak on this. Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too concur with the comments of Councillor Wilson about the finance department. They're always very professional in the way that I deal with them, and Craig is very good at answering emails in a very short space of time, so thank you, Craig. Obviously, I'm just concerned that it's only the first quarter and already we're predicting a lower outturn in rental income from the market and also for meter income from car parks. I'm also again slightly more worried about the fact that we're expected to lose money again on the civic hall bar service. The report states the main reasoning for this is because of the reduced service at the bistro. That may be the case, I accept that, but what is the council doing to look at how we can improve the bar service? What initiatives are we taking to make sure that in future we do start to make a profit from the bar? We can't afford to keep chucking money into these sorts of things if it's not going to be run properly. I know the portfolio holder was very good at the last full council meeting in answering some of the concerns of opposition councillors, and I know one of the things that he said he would do is go back to the civic hall manager, Tim Norton, and go and see if we can review the policy of opening the bar after performances. I think that's really needs to happen, even if we can just trial it for some of the performances, see if it works. It might not work, and if it doesn't, I'll accept that, but I think it's important that we try. I know someone who used to be a trustee at the Abbey Theatre on Paul Bank Street. They open up the bar after performances and they're absolutely raking it in, so I think it's something that we should just try, to be honest. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much. Are there any points of clarification, Councillor Evans? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from members?
Just
Councillor
on
Lloyd.
just on the bar. I was going to get the email then, but you beat me to it. It is going to be trialled, and I'm thinking, is it this month? Was it next month?
September, October.
They're going to trial it at selected shows. They're going to select some shows across, all variety of shows, and they will trial it. I think one of the big differences is with the Civic Hall and Abbey Theatre. Having attended a few shows at the Abbey Theatre over the years, you have to walk through the bar to get out, and a lot of people do stop and have a drink. Because of the size of the Civic Hall and the amount of people trying to get out of the Civic Hall, we open the main double doors so people can get a quick exit just before the bar. Both sets of doors are, so they go straight out the doors. But we have trialled it in the past, some years ago, and the cost of the staff being laid on outstripped the profit that was coming across the bar. But they are going to trial it again September, October. So it should be on trial now.
And we will be monitoring closely all income streams and all budget headings over the coming year. This is the Q1 update. It just shows some things, but I'm sure over the next 3 quarters we'll be monitoring closely. The recommendations are printed at section 2. Are we happy to agree those? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then on to item 10, which is the procurement of gas and electricity. These next two are on a separate agenda item, just so everybody is aware. The first one is the procurement of electricity. This is through the ESPO framework, which has been approved. The recommendation is that we continue our service agreement with Eastern Shires Purchasing Organisation as agents for procurement of electricity when our current arrangements with them expire at the end of September 2020 to the period of September 30th of September 2024. I don't think I have any speakers on this item. It is really is a framework that's been approved, ESPO. Are we all happy with those recommendations? Is that everybody, yeah? Okay. And then the second one is a very similar report with exactly the same time frames. This is to continue the service level agreement with the same organisation up until the 30th of September 2024. Are there any questions? Are we all happy with that recommendation? Okay, thank you. That's agreed. Coming on to item 12, which is recommendations from open scrutiny panels. Do we have anyone from the scrutiny panels here to share from those panels? The recommendations, we have 3 as I understand it, from the panels, that a yearly monitoring report including details of spend on section 106 monies and biodiversity net gain within and external to the sites be provided to the panel. Can I move that be so done?
Yeah.
Oh, I do apologise. I've whipped over the speakers. My apologies. I do have 3 speakers on this. Councillor Evans. I nearly went straight ahead there.
Thank you. I'd like to give my support for the 3 recommendations from the internal OSP as set out on the agenda. I very much hope that Cabinet will vote to adopt them this evening, in particular the 3rd recommendation that Cabinet looks corporately to increase the tree planting schemes within the borough. Cabinet may recall that a few months ago at full council I asked a question to Councillor Lloyd about whether the council will be applying for funding from the government's Urban Tree Challenge Fund. This was a £10 million pot of money for councils towards planting trees in urban areas. At the full council, Councillor Lloyd stated that the Parks Department would go away later in the year to assess the suitability of the funding and whether to put together an application. However, to my knowledge, the council has not submitted an application. In my opinion, this is completely wrong. Just a few months ago, the council adopted a document called Delivering Our Future, where priority 4 under the investment theme is to promote a sustainable green economy and minimising our carbon footprint. Trees are the obvious answer to minimising our carbon footprint. If we planted an additional 100 square metres of woodlands across the borough, that would be enough to store 4 tonnes of carbon. So I'm disappointed that the council decided not to bid for this funding when other councils have, and inevitably their residents will benefit from less air pollution as a result. One of the things we could do to increase tree planting schemes in the borough is to reintroduce a scheme we did around a decade ago, which was celebratory trees. People used to pay the council to plant a tree in one of the parks or a nature reserve or wherever for a birth, a wedding or a death. I myself had a tree planted for me by the council in 1998, and I still go once a year to visit my tree at the Windmill Hill Nature Reserve just outside of Camp Hill on Manchester Road. I'm not entirely sure why the service was scrapped originally, but I think it's a good idea, and of course it might even bring a bit of revenue in for the council as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any points of clarification? Can I thank you for your comments, and sorry for almost not allowing me to have the chance. I've also got Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Even though I think you almost briefly jumped over public speakers, I think it gave an indication as to which way the Cabinet is indicating it will go. But I would like to emphasise that I believe that Cabinet should go with these recommendations. We are going to be seeing massive development throughout the borough, and residents deserve to know, and councillors need to know as locally elected representatives, that the contributions that are supposed to come over to the council for the benefit of our communities as kind of a community compensation to offset what goes on is being taken in by the council, is being spent by the council, and most importantly being spent on the priorities of the residents and the needs of the area to offset some of these damages. So if Cabinet is going to go with that, I think that is extremely welcome, and I hope that those reports will be useful to all members. And biodiversity is another concern, particularly I know for some members on planning as well, because we often hear in the summation by officers that there will be a net loss of biodiversity on the site in some respects, but then they will compensate for it in others. And we have found that some of those compensations can be significant distances from the actual site. And it will be interesting to see how that works. What is the net benefit to the borough? What is the net benefit to the actual location which has had the development? And moving forward, if we are actually using the resources in the right way and tackling the issues appropriately, because the borough plan is due to take us to 2031. We need to make sure that we monitor the policy moving forward to ensure that we are getting the maximum benefit out of what the developers should be contributing to offset their developments within our borough. And I have to admit, when I hear from officers that biodiversity will be tackled off-site somewhere completely opposite end of the borough, it does frustrate me, because the residents in one particular area have seen a loss. Why should they lose out and not see a benefit elsewhere in the immediate locality? And I think having that information to hand and monitoring that as a council will be beneficial for councillors, but also enable the council to try and provide some element of reassurance to residents that we are listening to them, because I know it frequently comes up from residents when they have their 3 minutes, and also to know that the borough plan is working as intended.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for your comments. Any points of clarification? Thank you very much. And Councillor Llewellyn Nash.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak tonight. This is, rightly or wrongly, this is my first visit to the Cabinet, so thank you for letting me speak as well. I suppose some people say I'm our little tree champion. When it comes to full council, you're always, if there's a tree mentioned, I'm there. So, while I was looking through this pamphlet, I noticed that again, you've put up a recommendation to be made that the Cabinet look corporately to increase tree planting schemes within the borough. When I saw that, my I sort of, it gave a spark. We all know that we have got to start improving our carbon emissions and environment. Councils up and down the country are coming to the reality of that. Climate change is here and it's not going to go away too fast either. So as a council, we need to act now. It's not next year or in a couple of years. We need to act now. Starting to plant trees in any new development, whether town centres, housing estates and other urban areas, would be a great start. Studies have shown, and I'm sorry that I haven't put those studies down, so clarification of those studies I'll be able to tell you. But just looking at on the computer, studies have shown that trees in urban areas and town centres do improve the climate by capturing carbon emissions. And as Councillor Evans has already stipulated, 100 square metres equals 4 tonnes of 4 tonne stores of carbon emissions. So 100 square metres of woodland areas, that is, which obviously cleans the air. Studies have also shown that where towns have trees and woodland areas, this also has an improvement on mental health, because people like to walk through. It's if you have mental health issues, it's good to take walks and stuff. But they found particularly where there are trees, whether it's what they give off, but it has improved people's mental health well-being. I feel that in the past we have been far too hasty to actually cutting trees down, but now now's our time to start replanting trees, especially with the borough plan and other road improvements that are going to be made, that we must try and include tree planting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marsh. Are there any points of clarification? Thank you very much. Thank you. It's very useful to have member input into this agenda. There's obviously a great deal of interest in all of the items, but particularly in regard to trees. Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, just on the trees. I was going to vote for this anyway, but on the trees, just to show some of the councillors that have just mentioned it, that this is something we have been doing and have been doing it for a long time. In Councillor Llewellyn Nash's own ward, who I used to represent many, many years ago, I remember on at least 2 occasions where local schools were used. In that fact, on the last big exercise was when the Bedworth development was built. There was a tree survey done of all the trees within that area, and when they were cut down, now I can't remember the figures, but there was the trees were replaced, and sometimes they were replaced 2 or even 3 for 1, given the size of the trees that came down. And that is one of the reasons why we have the very lovely the old shunting yards at the bottom, or coal stocking areas as we used to call them, at the bottom of Smorrel Lane, where it's been completely transformed, along with the route up to the Nuke through the old mineral railway line. All that area is completely transformed by using some of those trees to plant there by local schools. I know, as has been said by Councillor Evans, Windmill Park, there's exercises over the years, even when I've been a councillor at Camp Hill, have taken place at Windmill Yard, down also off Queen Elizabeth Road, when we're doing the Barpool corridor there, where developers have paid for trees and bushes, etc. So it's not something we haven't been doing, we have been doing it for many, many years, as I've just evidenced. And I'd love to continue to do that and actually improve on that. So I totally agree with them. I think the recommendation that's there. I didn't have a problem with the recommendation that came to full council, and I've got no problem with the recommendation there. Every opportunity we'll try our best, certainly within parks, and hopefully within the planning development area, to replace trees at the best, to the maximum advantage. We've always done that.
Okay, any further comments? I'm going to take these individually because I do think they're really important and we need to actually emphasise what we're agreeing to. So the first one is about a yearly monitoring report that would go to the appropriate panel. I'm going to move that we actually agree that.
Seconded.
Is that agreed?
Yeah.
The second one is actually about training for elected members on habitat biodiversity. And I'm a big believer that you're never too old to learn things and that we should all continuously avail ourselves of training opportunities. So can I move that from the chair?
Yeah.
And is that agreed by
Yeah.
everybody? And the third one is regard to looking corporately to increase tree planting schemes within the borough. And I think that's something, again, that I hope all elected members would be thoroughly in favour of. So can I move that from the chair as well?
Yeah.
Is that agreed?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We come then to item 13, and I've got two items here. The first one I'm going to deal with is temporary accommodation provision, and I'm going to hand over Councillor Watkins to yourself.
Yeah, Councillor Chair. Temporary accommodation. Right, so we've got a report here from Dawn. I'm going to briefly go over it, and if anyone's got any questions, then I'm sure Dawn will be more than happy to answer any questions. We've going to go with a company called Cornerstone, and the Cornerstone can deliver our first property within the next 2 weeks. A further 7 properties before the end of the year. A further 6 by February 2020, and the remainder before then, at the end of March 2020. So the total provision of 20 units within the next 6 months. So this is to tackle the B&D problem. Based on progress with the provision of units above, we estimate that we may mitigate subsidy loss to the general fund by at least £30,000 for 2019-2020. Once temporary accommodation properties are in use, Cornerstone will begin providing 10 LHA private rented units for households to rent longer term. So that's it in summary. Or Dawn, if you want to present, or if anybody wants to ask me anything, they can do. Or if Dawn wants to say any more on Cornerstone, I'll hand it over to Dawn.
Thank you, Chris. Anything you need to add, Dawn?
I think, Chair, the only couple of things I'd add really is that Cornerstone do have some very very knowledgeable and experienced people in homelessness who have confirmed their ethical approach to the way that they provide services for homeless people. And we've witnessed that in discussions that we've had with them, and the additional units in the private stock, which will then allow us to discharge duty into the private rented sector, is invaluable to us, because even though we've got a new build programme, we are seeing a loss of private rented stock for varying reasons. We are seeing housing associations pulling away from taking on those who are homeless and on universal credits for affordability reasons. So we need to look for other ways to help deliver affordable housing in the borough, and we believe this is a really good initiative for us to start taking forward.
we don't have any speakers on this item. I note the matter is not subject to call-in, and I think that's to emphasise the urgency really of the position we're in, and I'm sure we would all want not only to make sure we mitigate the financial losses, but actually provide quality accommodation to the unfortunate people who find themselves homeless. So I'm happy to support the recommendations. Are they agreed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any against? No. So we will move forward. The second urgent item is on town centre regeneration. On the 26th of August, it was announced that the Future High Streets Fund was to be expanded, and a further 50 councils shortlisted to move to the next stage of business case development. Nuneaton and Bedworth were one of those councils and will receive up to £150,000 of grant funding to support the development of a business case to seek capital funding for the scheme. Whilst this is very good news for the council, the timescales are very tight. The government has requested approximate cost for our business case in early November, a draft business case in January, and a final business case by the end of April. In order to support the council in developing a business case for the conversion of the co-op building in Nuneaton, Cabinet are asked to approve that a procurement exercise be undertaken to engage with a development partner. The recommendations are at section 2 of the report. Councillor Wilson, I'd like you to address the Cabinet.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not usually in a habit of liking not for call-in reports for obvious reasons, because it's about scrutiny and oversight of the executive. But in this instance, I am more than pleased to support this item. Indeed, I had a briefing with both Brent and Simone literally days after the announcement. And I was also fortunate enough to go on to the airwaves of BBC Coventry and Warwickshire and actually promote and plug that we had this £150,000 of investment from the government. And I have to say, against some rather negative implications for Nuneaton Town Centre, I felt from the radio host saying, is it really going to make a difference? Well, in my view, it will make a difference, it can make a difference, but more importantly, as a council, we must make it make a difference, in my view. I'm pleased to see that we are looking at engaging external advice and support, because one of my reservations about all this constantly throughout anything has been the experiences of Gresham Road, and also, whilst not as bad, next door. And there is a serious issue about capability and competency in dealing with something which is a private sector role. We are, as a council in the public sector, we don't necessarily have that skill set within our own teams. And we need to move forward with a great deal of pace on this, because even if we aren't successful in getting the £25 million, this funding can actually help us with the plans through the Transforming Nuneaton aspect as well, which I'll declare an interest. I sit on that with yourself, Chair. And it's important that we utilise every tool we have in the box to make sure that we get the regeneration of Nuneaton up and running, and hopefully in time Bedworth we can get that running too. So we need to have all our ducks lined up, and incredibly quickly, and that is why I will be supporting this report. I haven't got an issue with being marked for call-in this case, but for heaven's sake, we need to make sure that we give it the best chance that we can, because the residents are expecting, now we've got this £150,000, that we actually do something positive with it. I know we can do something positive with it, but we must give them the proof that we can do something positive with it. Otherwise, if we try and do regeneration in the future, residents won't believe us when we say we're going to do something. And I think that is actually more of a hurdle in some instances than actually finding A, the political will, and B, the funding. If residents don't believe you, you haven't got a starting space anyway. So a really positive report, but I will be keeping an eye on it to make sure that we are moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any points of clarification? Thank you for your comments. You're quite right. We both sit on the Transforming Nuneaton board. I'm very positive about both of our main town centres, both Nuneaton and Bedworth, and we need to maximise their potential. in the coming years. In fact, that should be the duty of each and every elected member in the council. And I'm really pleased that we're talking up rather than talking down our town centres today. I think it's really imperative that actually all councillors talk up our two town centres rather than talk them down. I think it's a great place to live, and I look forward to what the future has to hold in both of our towns. The recommendations are as printed. Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, before we, excuse me, before we move off this report, I mean, I think, from my own personal view, we ought to be commending the officers that actually drew up this bid, and all the hard work that they did in a very short period of time to actually get us in with a shout of getting this money. And it's paid off, and we should be saying thank you to those officers for actually drawing up this bid and doing all that excellent work, because we've got very good officers there that know what they're doing, and they've done a good job here. So I think it has to be noted that.
And I'm very happy to add
second that.
another recommendation that we thank officers for their work in getting us to the stage that we have been successful in getting this grant funding. I'm sure if that work wasn't of an acceptable standard, we wouldn't be where we are today. So that was really good news, and I trust that our senior officers will pass on our thanks to relevant members. Are we happy with the recommendations?
Yep.
With that addition?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. We then come on to item 14, which is are members of the Cabinet happy to ask that we exclude the public and press in accordance with the Local Government Act? Okay, can I ask you to machine? Thank you.